It's Fill Your Plate Now, where every bite brings you closer to the farm gate and further from what's unhealthy. Now here's your hosts, Julie and Tammy, helping you live well by filling your plate well.
So Tammy, we're going to talk about a very important link in the food supply chain, and one of my favorite links, the restaurant industry.
I was going to say the same thing because that involved going out to eat, and
Right.
I love food, so this'll be fun.
And you know what? I love it when other people cook it for me, and the best places here is in Arizona and all across the country, but we have a really unique restaurant industry here in the state of Arizona, and I have as our guest Steve Chukri, who's president and CEO of the Arizona Restaurant Association.
You went to the top.
I went to the top. I went to the boss. Steve, welcome. And we just talked about that just before the show, that you're coming on your 25th anniversary with the Arizona Restaurant Association. So give us your story, and especially, I love to hear about your family legacy. You've told it to me before, so I've had the privilege of hearing it, and I think others should hear it as well.
Well, I'll give you the condensed version, but good to see both of you. And you didn't go to the top, but you certainly sent me an invitation I couldn't refuse. So thank you for letting me be with the two of you for a short while to get a brag about and really showcase what Arizona has in its best quality, and that is restaurants. So yes, I'm a third generation on my maternal side, Arizonan, and I'm a first generation on my paternal side, Arizona. My father immigrated from Lebanon when he was just a young boy with his mother and three sisters. Sadly, my grandfather was murdered due to the religious outbreaks in Beirut back in the time. And then on my mother's side, it's a great story, as you're recalling, Julie, in that my grandfather, Tony Corey, was born in a little town called Morenci, Arizona, that not many people know about. And he was here on a visa with his parents. His parents were on a visa. He was born, and shortly as an infant after his birth, went back to Beirut, Lebanon with my great-grandparents. And then at the ripe age of 13, decided to come back to Arizona with my great-grandfather through Mexico. And they said to my grandfather, you're a U.S. citizen by birthright, which is an interesting topic with recent ruling in the past week. And they said to my great-grandfather, you're not. And so, again, age 13, my great-grandfather writes his name on a note card, wraps it around his neck, hands him $5 and says, good luck, you're on your own. And, I've got young boys. Now they're adults, young adults nonetheless. But when they were 13, they would go crazy if their iPad broke or ran out of battery life. And so, yeah, he sold dry goods door to door. And back in the day, that's when the Globe, Miami area was bustling as a mining town. And he found a friend that said he needed a car, and that my grandfather was walking the streets every day and said, hey, if you see something, let me know. And sure enough, my grandfather did. Changed the price on the window, sold it to him, made a little money, and went to his best friend, Eddie Basha, who was hawking produce out of the back of a pickup truck, and said, I'm moving down to the valley. So in 1928, my grandfather went into the car business. In 1932, Eddie Basha Sr. went into the grocery business. So it's a great, great story of legacy, which is partly what we're going to talk about today, with how Arizona has really transformed over the decades in our restaurant business.
Yeah, I just love hearing your story, Steve, and was privileged to host you as our lead feature for Arizona Agriculture a few years ago. And hearing that story again is always an inspiration. Everyone has a great story.
Oh, that's amazing. And the connection to the Basha family, which is so intimately entwined in Arizona. That's amazing. And you said you've been with the restaurant industry for over 20 years.
Yeah, 25 years last month. I joke, I in college was a busboy for 2 days because I knew I'd get fired on my third. And so, coming back to the industry in a leadership way is fun and exciting. And, it gets in your blood. The car business obviously got in my blood as a young boy, but the restaurant industry is too. And my youngest son, who's going into his senior year at Brophy, just got his first job in the restaurant industry over the weekend. So it's kind of fun to see the importance. And you'll pass someone on the street, and probably within 30 minutes you would have passed by a dozen or so people that have sometime in their life worked in the restaurant industry. Our own Governor Hobbs, brags about her start in the industry when she was just a teenager herself. So it's a wonderful industry. It's been a privilege to be able to lead the industry here in Arizona for the past 25 years.
I think it's always a good idea for everyone to have some kind of restaurant industry experience. I worked as a waitress when I was in college, and I just learned a lot about people, about the business. It was a good experience, and brought in a little extra money, so it was nice. But I know there's been a lot of changes over the course of time. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in the way of changes over the last several years.
Well, first and foremost, the economic engine that is restaurants is powerful. It's incredibly powerful. We're the backbone of many businesses, but of the industry in itself. When it comes to small business, you'll find it in a restaurant. This year alone, we in Arizona plan to have sales of about $24 billion. That's with a B. Our daily payroll is $24 million, not including tips. And we employ roughly 300,000 people, representing about 13,000 restaurants in the state. So you might have been paying attention a few weeks ago when they passed the state budget. Or our revenues that we bring to the state are well above that. And across the country, if you want to extrapolate, we're going to have $1.15 trillion in restaurant sales this year in the United States. So to what you just said, Tammy, we're that cornerstone of every community. We are there for the single mom and the single dad and people who are trying to have that convenience of a work-life balance where they can drop their kids off in the morning, go work a shift or two, and still come back and be able to tend to their family life. So we're proud of that. And it's an industry that has, as Julie and others will know, those who have been in Arizona a while, has really expanded in its diversity. I joke that we used to have two kinds of food growing up in Arizona, Mexican food and then a different kind of Mexican food. That culinary diversity today is just amazing when you really stop and watch how far we've come.
And that leads into my question. Why is our restaurant industry so profoundly amazing here? I know because I eat out a lot. In fact, going home today after today's show, I think I'll probably stop at a restaurant because I will be too tired to cook for myself. And I have seen it, and I've grown up watching some of the changes. And we even have a lot of chefs that are James Beard winners. What has made our restaurant industry here in Arizona so special?
Well, I think if you really go back and try to track how restaurants have expanded throughout the state, it comes down to one kind of focal point, and it's not just one, but one spoke in that wheel would be that we are a melting pot geographically in Arizona, not necessarily culturally. Of course, we are culturally too, but I'm speaking to the geographics. If you look from the Midwest, how much Midwest influence we have here, especially from the Chicago region, and now this influx of people coming from California. Restaurants. There's a saying in the business, same in the farming industry, that make sure you have a seat at the table so you don't end up on the plate. And when you're in this industry that's constantly, in almost a cascading fashion, changing and diversifying every day, if not monthly, weekly, it's something to pay attention to. And that's why Portillo's, let's give them an example, out of the Midwest, right, coming to Arizona. I'm not saying we were the first step outside of the Midwest, but for Maple and Ash, which is a well-known steakhouse, we were their first footprint outside of Chicago, outside of Illinois. Another great concept that's coming to the old Metro Center, where the old PV Mall is Hughes Culinary, and they're coming up with their concept called Harry and Izzy's, which is out of Indiana. So people see the promise of what we have here in Arizona by the population growth, by the fact of where these people are coming from, is, again, a geographic melting pot from across the country. So there's a lot of palates, right, that won't be hard to please versus something that's more homogeneous in that, you're not going to have that. So I credit it to really more recently the population growth and them paying attention to it. But going back maybe a decade or a decade and a half, it had more to do with us pulling more from the Midwest and having people move here, as well as other parts of the country.
And you said you initially were affiliated more with the auto industry, but then you went into the restaurant industry. What drew you to the industry, and why the change?
Well, you grow up in a family business, and I love my grandfather and my family that ran the dealership. My grandfather couldn't read or write. He was only, I think, had a third grade education when he came to Arizona, and he taught himself, and he did learn how to read and write, and he became the first licensed auto dealer in the state, and my family ran the business for 82 years. And so I wanted to have more of an experience than that. Tammy, I went back to Washington, D.C., worked on Capitol Hill for 6 years after college, and decided that I was going to maybe go in a different direction than the family business. And I wasn't, there's no looking back, as they say. It was a great opportunity for me. And then the more I got to know the industry, I got hired more from my political background than I did my acumen of restaurants. So that kind of transformed into learning a lot about the industry, now being an investor myself, a silent investor in many restaurants here in the state. So my board loves it because I've got skin in the game, and I've got a second mortgage on a house just like they do. And it's really opened my eyes in recent years to both sides of the table, right? Leading the industry on one hand, but on the other hand, having a lot to gain and a lot to lose if we don't do well.
And just seeing the numbers and seeing the growth and seeing the innovation that's taking place in the industry, you have a bird's eye seat. One of the things I have to ask the farm-related question, often restaurants are really that bridge between farm fresh product and your diners. What is the Arizona Restaurant Association's role in strengthening that role, if there is a role for your association to play?
There is a role, and there has been for some time, Julie, in that, there was a time where we would be having dinner with farmers on a regular basis, or at least twice a year, or the beef growers, to make sure that when things that were passing through the legislature or came to the legislature that might, threaten us mutually, that we certainly had to lock arms and make sure that we were protecting our industry, because we really are an industry of one. Whether they're selling their product to a grocery store or to a restaurant, they're both retail and the same when you really stop and think about it. So we've had it for some time, more from a political standpoint. But going back to what I said earlier, if you're not paying attention to what consumer behavior is about, then you will end up on that plate. And so in working with the farmers and the growers and saying, okay, what's this farm fresh plate, this having culinary events out in the middle of a farm, which has been really a successful event planning mechanism for both sides of the industry. We have come to understand more and more, and it's only becoming incredibly more important as we go further, that the consumer wants to make sure not only that they know where their food is coming from, where it's being produced, but the quality thereof, right? How is that cattle being fed, and what kind of oils are being used when it gets to our kitchen? And that fresh to plate kind of mentality really started about 10 or so years ago, and it hasn't stopped. And then when you move into the gluten-free environment and some of these allergy-related, food-related issues, it becomes very much more important to understand where your suppliers are getting their product. And so you probably, either one of you, would not go to a restaurant without at least hearing, are there any allergies we need to be aware of? And so having that tight-knit relationship with the growing community is very, very important. And it used to be that they were outliers that would work with us. Now it's a lot of members of the community that understand that importance. And it's through that passion, going back to your earlier question, Julie, that these chefs have come up with, growing some of their small vegetables outside of their restaurants. Kevin Binkley did that with his restaurant for many, many years. And that passion and that creativity and that attention to detail is what has brought us the James Beard nominees here in Arizona, because that kind of focus and attention is what you need to be successful in our industry, but also to stand out from the competition, if you will.
And the Bianca family, do I have that right? They do the pizza. Well, they were the chefs that were adamant about making sure that they got some of that Sonoran whole grain, which is an older grain. And so these are our chefs, our restaurant people that are doing this and inspiring some of these amazing dishes because of their creativity and connecting with the farmer to get that done.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I love that farm to table mentality and the freshness of all of that. And you both mentioned some of the national awards chefs and restaurants have received. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of those restaurants and chefs and highlight a few details on them?
Yeah. Most of them are more small entrepreneurial restaurants. You've got, for example, Joey Maggiore. He's not necessarily, I think, been nominated, but has come very, very close. You've got chefs that have worked in hotel restaurants that have received it, and you've got a lot of female chefs that are real standouts in the state who have. Charlene has gotten some I think an award. Actually, she did get an award. I want to say 2 to 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and was one of our first. Now we're talking, Tammy, about having Michelin-rated restaurants, which we're going to find out here, hopefully in the next 8 to 10 weeks, if we're going to get some Michelin-rated restaurants here in Arizona. So, we've come a long way. While there might be a handful, and I can't mention all of them, but we've got a good at least 10 restaurateurs who have been nominated and a handful of winners from that, which is really gratifying to see. And this business sometimes can take more than it gives, and when you get that shot in the arm with such a nomination and God willing, an actual award, to follow. That's a lot of gasoline in the tank to go and endeavor and do more and be more creative. And you can look at every city, whether it's Scottsdale with Chef Gio, and I told you about already about Chef Joey, who he is. He's got a third generation. The Joey Maggiore and his father really started in the business. Joey's become the second generation. Joey's son and kids now are in it. And so when you see 3 generations in this industry, that's one of the most competitive and difficult industries to survive right here in Arizona, starting with Tommaso's way back in the day, that is gold in its purest form, because that kind of success doesn't happen. And we have a saying in the business, Tammy, that, the chef, once they exit the door of the kitchen, they fall flat on their face, because the business side, they're not very good at. Well, they're very good at the trade of cooking and being that dynamic chef. But the business side can be challenging, and that's not a criticism. But so when you see a generation after generation after generation be successful like you do in the Maggiore family, that's amazing. That's awesome. And then you've got Chef Bernie with the Gladly, who's opening up multiple concepts and doing well. You've got a young chef who's just full of vitality with Chris Collins, whose father started with just a pub. And now Chris has got, I think, 12 or 13 different restaurants. And so and they're all here, right? And then, of course, Sam Fox goes without saying, of, being the major and one of the first, I should say, exporters of Arizona restaurants around the country. So we've got a great story to tell. I'm really grateful for Julie inviting me on the show, because when you really start to peel back and see the kind of success we've enjoyed as an industry, it's something to really kind of push your chest out and be proud of.
What do you think in terms of Arizona? attracting so many great chefs. Is there something special about Arizona that is bringing them in? Because we are really seeing a lot of chefs that are receiving.
I think success begets more success, right? I think when you look at Arizona and you see our success in the industry, people want to be a part of that, and to be somewhat selfish, I think we're a safe risk, right? When you're the Hughes Culinary Group, who has one of the oldest steakhouses in Indiana, and actually probably the country. I think it was 1902. That's still operational today, and I think now they're the third owner. Coming to Arizona, that's very flattering. So I think they're seeing the success. I think they're seeing the geographic diversity that I spoke of. I think they're seeing the population growth, and most importantly, I think they see opportunity.
I had a chef one time tell me that it's the environment here in Arizona, not only the business environment, but the creativity environment has what's inspired them to really embed themselves in the restaurant industry here in Arizona, which I thought was really interesting. And that's kind of my next question. I think you said earlier at the beginning of the show, it's a $23-24 billion industry in the restaurant business here in Arizona. And there's been a lot of successes, but there's also a lot of challenges. It makes me think of farming. You know, the profit margin is very thin sometimes. Look at what everybody went through in COVID and all the challenge, although it did force a lot of creativity because you had to think of how to keep the business going despite the challenges. What do you see as a future for Arizona in the restaurant world?
Well, I think we're going to continue to trailblaze. I think we're going to continue to endeavor. You've got DTF, which is a popular dumpling concept that has come to Arizona, and you can't get a reservation. I've been able to get in for months. I think you'll see yet more steakhouses coming to Arizona, and more importantly, you're going to see the expansion of brands. Some of the brands I mentioned, not only expand within the state, but also expand out of state. The one brand I just told you about, Hughes Culinary, who's coming here, is already building a second location in Gilbert, which I think, Julie, you're out that way, aren't you, on the east side, or are you on the west
Yes,
side?
I
Yeah.
am.
So you're going to have a new restaurant hopefully opening up here soon, and they haven't even opened up their first restaurant. They're already doing a site selection. So trailblazing and endeavoring and paying attention. You know, we're an industry of trends. Ozempic and some of these other new concepts, new drugs coming out have not necessarily been our friend. A couple that used to order an appetizer, an entree, and dessert and drink now may be splitting an entree and not skipping the dessert, and maybe splitting an appetizer as well and not drinking any alcohol. So as an industry, we have to adapt to that and be more thoughtful and creative in what we do. This younger generation, which both of my sons qualify for, don't drink much. They're looking for other options. They're looking for some of this THC infused alcohol in food. So there's never a dull moment in the industry, and it's so multifaceted and constantly moving that if you don't stay as fluid as it, you're not going to be around long. So that's what I think you'll see the future hold for many restaurants is making sure that they're not too far away from the tip of the spear, because if you are, you're going to be lagging and you may not recover. So you'll see that diversity come through. I think the next time you go to a restaurant and you look at the menu and you see just the variety there, you'll understand why. Because if you don't have that variety, you can't pull from the younger generation, the middle-aged, and the older generation. You're not going to be in business long, and that's what's truly. If you said what do you see that scares you? We're a very, very competitive based industry, and you have to be competitive in order to stay relevant and successful. But if you start to get too many restaurants, and the population doesn't keep up with it, and the dining trends don't keep up with it, then you've got a real problem. And so we do our best job to say to our members who are growing to make sure you're growing, that old saying, slow is steady and steady is fast. Make sure you're steady about your growth, because you don't want to have to ever close a restaurant. And that's what we hate to see. And it's the biggest cause of that is growing too fast.
And Steve, it tells me your role with the Arizona Restaurant Association there is never a dull moment, and you've got to keep your eyes open and ready for the next change, right?
You do. And, we're a very regulated industry as well. And so we make a point to work with our health departments around the state, our liquor department, and municipalities. Whataburger is going to grow by 14. I mean, you can call them a chain, which they are, not too far away in Texas, but they're going to, between last year and this and next, build 14 to 15 new restaurants in Arizona alone. And so that's a lot for not just quick service, right? That's just one brand. Not to mention, all the other casual dining segments and fine dining segments that are expanding as well.
Well, and it's just proof of how quickly Arizona is growing that we do need more restaurants.
Yes, and there's all different types of restaurants.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but about 65% of the restaurants are independently owned or smaller restaurants?
That's right, yes. And that's an alarming number for most. They think that chains tend to dominate in our state, and they really don't. Now, that number has changed, Tammy, over years. That number used to be 75%, 25% chain. And it has, in my 25-year tenure, dropped to 65%, but still very strong. And that's really the true backbone and engine that keeps our industry alive and well.
And are there particular challenges and innovation you see coming from these independent restaurants that you might not see from the chains?
Well, I think that, it's when you're a chain, if a store's not doing so well, you can kind of feed it, where as an independent, you don't have that luxury. But I think the independents of today understand a lot of what we discussed in this time together, and that is that you've got to remain very nimble, and you have to be very careful as to any types of fluctuations you make to your menu pricing, but more importantly, what you're putting on the menu, and that is going to appeal to wide audiences. And so I would say that, a few decades ago, maybe in 2010, that wasn't an issue, or that was a bigger issue back then, that people weren't following trends, and they were just saying, this is how we've always done it. And sadly, a lot of those restaurants are no longer with us. So, but today, I don't think that's it. I think that the small independents know their niche, and they know it well, and they thrive very well off repeat business, and they make sure they stay close to their customer.
Steve, you're probably tired about answering this question, but, since we've been out of the pandemic and considering how brutal it was on the whole food system in general, and now we've come back strong, especially in the restaurant business after the pandemic. It is 2026. But our summers, being hot in Arizona, they can also be brutal to restaurants. Sometimes their attendance is down. What is the strategy for a lot of these restaurants in adapting to either seasonal changes or, God forbid, something as dramatic as what happened during the pandemic?
Right. And that's a great question, Julie. And remind me how long you've been here in Arizona.
I'm a native.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So Julie, if you go back to the 1970s, in the 1980s, we didn't have seasonality. Our population was much less then, and you would go up to Flagstaff, or you'd go to Pine Top for a week, and then you'll be back. So as we grew as a state, and it was just as hot back then as it is today, if not hotter. But as we have grown, so has the wealth of the state, and so has the diversity of the state, whereby it created the seasonality. And the seasonality for those restaurateurs that have been in business for 40 plus years, they had to adapt well, because you didn't have those problems back in the day. Today, it's one of the toughest things we struggle with, to be candid. And, you get used to it. Once you understand that there is this seasonality, which, by the way, we've had now for a good 15 to 20 years, the reality of that is you have to hold money back, right? You've got to be able to manage your profit and loss statement in such a way that during those good years, those good months, I should say, you are going to be able to know you're going to have to hold back a couple $100,000 or $150 to get through those 3 to 4 brutal months of summer. And I think, that's where we've stepped in as an association, I'm proud to say, with our spring restaurant week and our fall restaurant week, which is coming up almost 2 decades now. I mean, one of the longest running restaurant weeks in the country that's owned by a state restaurant association. So, that was the idea and the concept of spring restaurant week and fall, that as you go into the summer months, we're going to boost you, give you a lot of business for 10 days where you can stockpile those nuts, if you will, in the back, and then get you through the summer, and then have that nice strong punch in the arm as you're coming out of the summer doldrums and into season with our fall restaurant week. And then last year we started something a little different that speaks to the chef-driven industry that we just talked about, and to Tammy's question about the 65% of independents. And we started Chef's Week. And Chef's Week runs July 31st through the 9th of August. And it's chef-driven restaurants only. We're very selective in that you can only have a restaurant that's in Arizona. Like, you can't be in another state. It has to just solely be Arizona. You have to have a chef-driven menu that's unique and that is not like Restaurant Week, and has a shelf life that you won't use that again. That it's just going to draw customers in, and you're going to feel special about it. And then when those 10 days are over, you're not going to use that combination of a prefix menu. And so, the Geos of the world that run Scottsdale restaurants, the Bernie, who I mentioned earlier, Joey Maggiore, all these great and wonderful chefs, Justin Beckett, all these great people, they loved it. We did our first one with just a short notice last summer, and it was very successful. And this summer, we're going to launch here at the end of the month. And I think we've already got over 50 restaurants participating, which is more than last year. And so it's very unique. And we're proud. The only thing good about having year one is having year two. So it was successful enough to have a second annual event. And so those are some of the things we're doing as an association to drive revenue during these tough months, so our chefs and our restaurants can succeed. And so far it's working. And next summer we're thinking of doing maybe some kind of a competition that's more consumer friendly, and invites our customers to play a game where they can get points and get free meals and that kind of thing, or win something at the end of summer. So we're always thinking, but that's one of the 3 tools in our tool chest that we've used to help with those doldrums of summer months.
Excellent. And I love restaurant weeks, by the way.
Oh, good.
Thank you for conceiving those.
That's a great idea, though, having the summer competitions like that with the chefs. That's great.
That'd be fun.
And, looking ahead, I'm sure as a restaurant association, you're seeing so many changes in technology now. Talk a little bit about technology and how you see that enhancing the restaurant industry.
Well, technology is a very important part of what we're utilizing in our restaurants today. Is it going to replace hospitality? I mean, is it going to replace the face of your favorite server? Is it going to replace the chef coming out of the kitchen and sitting at a booth with guests on a Friday night? No, of course not. We're the hospitality industry, and we're not the hostility industry. And so when you talk about that hospitality, you've got to be hospitable, right? You've got to be personable. And so, yes, while you might go into the quick service segment of our industry and look at computers and technology to fulfill your order, that's very much going to happen, and it's going to continue to happen. And it will happen in the fast casual industry segment rather as well. So we've got 4 segments of the industry: quick service, which is your typical drive-through; fast casual, which you go to the desk and order or the counter and order, and they bring you the food, or you come and get the food. And then you've got casual dining, which is the largest segment, which is where you're, tableside service, and then fine dining, right? We all know what fine dining is. And so will you see that more in certain segments of the industry? Yes. Is AI technology more capable, and is it starting to prove that it can upsell more than a human through a drive-through? Yes, that's very, very real. And it sounds like a person, and people evidently are enjoying it because they're upselling more so than a human. Are you going to see robotic arms? in the back of the house, in the kitchen. Absolutely, you will. Will you see robots delivering food? Yeah, while they're there, I don't think so. I know they are alive, if you want to call it that. I know that they have been created, but I think it falls short in some areas. But yes, I think technology in reminding people, our employees, of what you have to do to avoid slip and falls and those types of things. Technology is going to really start to play more and more of a role behind the scenes in that way too. But when it's consumer and customer facing, at the end of the day, like I said, we're the hospitality industry, and there's only so much you can take away because people want to go. They want to go and escape when they go to a restaurant. And going back to what Julie said, with the downturn, if God taught us anything about those sad months, if not more than a year of COVID, it was that we need that human interaction. We need that human connection. And that holds true with what we do in the restaurant industry. So yes, technology is always going to be very important, but it can't replace certain critical functions in a restaurant.
McClendon Select, one of our direct market farms in the Phoenix metro area, serves or takes care of a lot of our high-end chefs. And we have some other direct market farmers that's their specialty. They may take their produce also to the farmers markets, but they certainly have a cadre of chefs that ask for specific things, and it's fun to hear about these stories. Is there anything currently that between the farm gate to the restaurant plate that is kind of emerging and or just a fun story to share?
Well, sadly, Bob passed away.
Yes,
and
he
we,
did.
We
But
honored
I think
him.
Yes, we honor him. His son, I do believe, is still farming.
Right.
I hope.
And so I think that's a great example and a great story of just how far we've come, because back in the day, that was just a hobby for Bob. And it kind of became, I want to help my friends out. And then it, became a very good and successful business. And so, I don't know if I have any stories, but I will tell you that what was once a hobby, for Bob became a necessity for restaurants. And he saw that. He could have easily said, I'm done. I'm not going to be able to do that. I don't want the stress. I don't want the responsibility. But he didn't. And for those chef-driven restaurants, Julie and Tammy, that's very important. It's very important to have that, because that's what sets you apart from a lot of restaurants and from the crowd, if you will, because with that specificity and that uniqueness, you can do things that you can't always do when you're creating a menu or you're creating a dish. And when you're a big, nothing against the chains. I love the chains. They're very much an important part of who we are as an industry. But they are looking at Arizona along with maybe 10 or 12 or 13 other states. Whereas an independent is looking at, okay, how can I be the best that I want to be? And if a chain restaurant offers that in Arizona and they're in 13 other states, they have to offer that same thing in 13 other states typically, right? Because you've got to train people, you've got to have that cohesiveness and uniformity in order to be successful. So that's why it's very important to the independents, because they have that freedom of creativity. They've got that freedom to where they could try something and not have to worry about doing it 13 times over and creating a manual on how to prepare it and everything else. And so when you try to have that creativity and the success that comes with it, your ingredients and where you get those ingredients that create these masterful menu items, it becomes all the more important.
And things are just constantly changing. So it's fun to see the evolution of the restaurant industry. And, one of the things that has changed, particularly over the last several years, is we're seeing so many consumers who are either gluten-free or have a food allergy or maybe vegetarian. What does the restaurant industry do, or what have they been doing to really keep up with that and be able to accommodate those consumers?
Well, I remember probably it was back in 2010 or so, 2012, I was with a restaurant owner in his restaurant, in his booth. We were sitting in a booth, and he was facing the hostess stand, and I was facing him, and he, kept looking over my shoulder, which isn't uncommon in the restaurant business. Everyone, they're always fixated on what's happening in the restaurant. And these 5 women came into his restaurant, and they spoke with the hostess for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then they all turned around and walked out. And he immediately got up from our meeting and went and spoke to the hostess and said, why did they leave? And she responded with, they were looking for some gluten-free menu items, and we don't have any. And I expressed that to them. And he said, starting tomorrow, we will. And by golly, they figured it out. And so it was very important that, that was, more than a decade ago. And that the gluten was, no one knew what it was. I mean, you could have an allergy, and it was so frustrating because you didn't know why you felt the way you did. And then thankfully, through science and other means, we found out that gluten can really be devastating for people. And so that was kind of the tipping point, if you will, to all these other issues now that we see, right? That people could have an allergy to. And we've gotten very sophisticated in how we are preparing meals and what can be left out and what can't be. And so when chefs today are preparing menu items, they're thinking of what potential allergies there are. What's the most common? Gluten, right? I think is now the most common. So what can we do that are gluten-free, whether it's a dessert or an entree or whatever else? And then what are some of the other common ingredients that people could potentially have an allergy to? And so whenever you go to a restaurant, I mean, I would put $1,000 on the table that if you went to 5 restaurants, at least 4, if not 5 of the 5 are going to ask you, are there any allergies at the table? And so it's something that we're not necessarily concerned. Of course, we're going to be concerned that if you have an allergy and you have a horrible reaction to it, that's first and foremost. But what also, the question's also being asked because we want to offer you, should you have an allergy, alternatives that we have on the menu, and alternatives that may have the allergy that you possess in the ingredients, but how we could still prepare that without what you're allergic to, right? So it's become very, very important. And restaurants, whether you're a mom and pop or you're a multifaceted 50-state chain, we've gotten very good at it. And we've gotten great opportunities and options for our guests, regardless of what their food allergy might be.
I can confirm that for you, Steve. Just in the last several times I've gone into the restaurant, we're always asked, the table is asked, does anyone here have any allergies? Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
it's very common. Well, we have one more question for you. And,
I've got one more answer.
Oh, good. We're even.
We're even. And what we always like to do at the end of the show is ask our guests, what are the best insights related to your area of expertise? So in your case, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you would suggest for our Arizona families to enjoy and maximize their time at a restaurant here in our state?
I think it's really incredible that in recent years, it's kind of been a saw blade. Some years were up, some years were down, but restaurant sales have outperformed grocery store sales the past couple of years. Think about that on a socioeconomic level. People are going out. You said it earlier, Julie. I'm not gonna cheat you or tell secrets, but you're gonna go on your way home and pick food up and go home because you don't want to cook tonight. Well, you're in the majority, not the minority. So restaurant sales across the United States have sold more food than grocery stores. And so are people just doing that because of pure convenience? No. They're doing that because, yes, that's a very important part of it. They want the convenience. But what's happening around that table is even more important. And family time. I got the chance to take my youngest son to the World Cup in Houston last week, and it was just the 2 of us. And he's like, Dad, what restaurants are we going to go to, right? Because he wanted to try something different that was in Houston that we hadn't had here in Arizona. And so I think what I would share with your viewers and those restaurant goers or foodies, as we call them, is first and foremost, dive outside of your comfort zone. That's why restaurant weeks exist as well. It's not just to drive business to restaurants. Of course, we want that, but we want diners to go and try something else that's going to be at an economical level So if they feel like they don't like it, they didn't just waste money. So get outside your comfort zone and try something else, because you might find a great new restaurant that's become your favorite. Secondly, use the time in the restaurant and soak up the ambiance. I mean, it used to be that you had to have good food, of course, right, and good service. But now you've got to have that experiential factor, the ambiance, which people are really, really looking to. And so when you go into these restaurants, these are multi-million-dollar investments. And we're doing that for you, the diner, for you, the customer, to have that experiential factor when you come in the beauty of the restaurant, and not only just the food and the service, but to go and just relax and enjoy the people you're with, and in an environment that's welcoming. And so, I would just say, don't rush through it. I've got friends that say, hey, we got to run and let's go eat really quick. Well, why? Why do we have to eat really quick? We're already fast paced enough in our lives. Let's sit down and let's enjoy each other. And like I said, if COVID taught us anything, it's the importance of that human connection. And there's no better place to experience a human connection than in a restaurant.
And I so confirm that. I hate to rush and eat. I love the ambiance. I love the experience. I love to just visit. Of course, I've been told I asked too many questions anyway, but that's what people have to deal with. So
I love the restaurant experience. So
Yeah.
it is a very relaxing, fulfilling experience when
it
you
really
can
is.
relax and enjoy yourself and enjoy the food. This has been great.
And Steve, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy busy day and hanging out with us on Fill Your Plate Now. And we're going to help you spread the word that we've got a great restaurant scene here in the state of Arizona.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be your guest, and hopefully we'll have another chance at it in the coming months, and we could talk about other things related to restaurants. It's definitely more than an hour-long conversation.
We loved having you on. We're going to have him back
Yes,
again.
absolutely.
I'm getting hungry now.
I know, I am
Yeah.
too. I'm
That
going
was
to go
the
to a
idea. It
restaurant
worked,
and
Tammy. It worked.
Yeah.
I am going to go out to eat tonight. And per your advice, I'm going to pick something out of my comfort zone.
Good.
And then I'll do a follow-up, Steve.
All right. That
All
sounds great. Thank you both. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.